Yes, yes, yes. Salam to Tena Stalin. Going easy on this map study. I really got on a good algorithm of maps linking a very important theme, and that's the Ethiopia theme right here. As well as you can see in this map right here, you see we're in the kind of a mustard brownish color where it says Upper Ethiopia. Let's see if we can zoom in right there. You see where it says Upper Ethiopia. It says Upper Ethiopia right there. Then over here where it says on top Negroland, you see Negroland as Negroland. Then below it, it says Lower Ethiopia. I think this is interesting because this particular map has the ocean name, the Atlantic Ocean. Now we have maps within this particular Google algorithm which also link it kind of chronologically, how they start to change, laws and times and names. So we're going to follow up a little bit more on this right here, this particular map. Let's bring this out. This is dated as 1747. 1747. So this is going to be this one part right here. And like I said, I'm going easy on these particular maps right here because I see that before they were like all over the place. It seems as though maybe the algorithms, maybe others are searching it, so it's getting kind of linked together. Now I don't know when they know ones are onto it, they may begin to suppress knowledge. That's why everyone has to do their own due diligence to kind of back this up for themselves, find the ways and the means to back it up as well as to print it out. Now here's an interesting one right here. I'm going to this one. I think this is a fresh pick right here. Let's just do this right here. We're going to save these as we go along. Alright, it's important to save these as we go along. Sometimes just to double tap save. Now this one right here, this is mapped by Emmanuel Bowen, 1747. Now if we zoom in right here, now you already see the Lower Ethiopia, Upper Ethiopia, Negroland. Just to keep that check, because when we point to the scriptures with some ain't right Israelites, they want to dispute the obvious. Where it says, "Are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel?" So you can see where the ocean right here, the southern Atlantic, the Atlantic is over here. Well, now they're putting the Atlantic there, but this is the Gold Coast, the Slave Coast, so forth and so on. You see the link with Negroland on this map. Now over here they say Abyssinia. So they go through a lot of little name either it's name changes or, well, later on it's name games. Definitely name games. Now you can see over here, this is where the times of the Gentiles are coming in. Now Gentiles, the Goya means nations. So the time of the nations, the nation states, and also with the rise of, we could say, Rome again, that Greco-Roman, the people who crucified HaMoshiach, Yeshua. I know you think, oh, it was the Jews. Well, they had reason, even the black Jews had reason to want HaMoshiach, the black Messiah, dead. Now that's a whole other thing, but the hands of it were the Romans. So it's actually the Romans. Remember, Rome really never really fell, so to speak. I mean, it fell in a kind of it didn't fall in the final sense, because Revelation points to that Roman Empire. So anyway, just to trace the connection with when we say the end of the world, the end of the times of the Gentiles, and the Gentiles are the nations, and the nation states is when they begin to divide Africa even more so than you see in this particular map right here. But it's important to study, the cartography, these particular maps, along with the date that these maps were, and also certain historical elements. But here we're making the main link between the children of the Ethiopians and the children of Israel, according to prophecy, and also the link between the Negro and the Ethiopian connection, that only is one particular, what they call the Zondervan. I think some of the ain't right Israelites, they like this particular concordance, a Zondervan, something like that concordance, where they, make a big bahoo, about who's who according to that table of nations. Remember the table of the Gentiles, the nations of the Goyim. Now we have to look at it prophetically according to the word. You know, the word. In the beginning was the word, Hadebarim. Interesting, we're in Deuteronomy, you know, in this season, at this particular time, coming up on the real 2012. But looking at this map, again, we see over here, we see Ethiopia. Note this right here. Here we have Ethiopia, and up here we have Abyssinia. And you see where it says the Gales, the Gullahs, the Galas, the Galas, the Gullahs, right? So Ethiopia is right here. And then the ocean is called the Ethiopic Ocean. We showed you from the beginning where right here where it has Negroland, it was called Lower Ethiopia. So going to the west of Africa in the older maps was referred to as Lower Ethiopia, or Ethiopia in the sense inferior compared to Upper Ethiopia, which would be over here. Now it's interesting because the promised land, according to the Abrahamic word that was given to Abraham, that word of promise for his seed to inherit the land, was from the river of Egypt, right? And the river of Egypt connects with the river of Ethiopia. So it's in this particular east of the river now, right? East of the river now. But let's just zoom out right here, because this map, we're just looking at some of the links and connection, and then going to have to backtrack, you know, the maps. Now, we see the map down here. This is that 1710. Got to get a copy of this 1710. Before we go there, let's go right here with this particular map right here, because we also see, let's see the date and time of this. Okay, may have to go into the page to see more of the date and time. But we can clearly see that this map, let's see, appears to be a later map, and we can tell when we look at the ocean. Now, Ethiopia is totally taken off of the ocean, but this is also in connection with what is known as maritime law. Okay, that was 1792, so definitely it is a later map right there. Let's just close that right there. So we have the Indian Ocean, but we still have Ethiopia over here in Central Africa. This is very, very interesting. Now, remember the older maps would call this Ethiopia, Upper Ethiopia, or Ethiopia Superior. Going east, more and more going to the west, leaving east of the river now. Crossing that river would be leaving the Abrahamic promised land to the children of Israel, children of the Ethiopians. We have that word there. So here's the Ethiopia connection with this map right here. Okay, so zoom out. We're curious as what is linked. And there is the map that we sought to show you. Let's backtrack right here. And it's this map right here, 1710. Now this is a very, very interesting map. Map of Judah Min. Black history in the Bible. Very, very good that this is linked with black history in the Bible, because it's a very, very important map. It's 1710. Let's zoom in to this particular 1710 map. We had did a vid where we highlighted this particular map, gave great emphasis to this particular map, because now as we look over here, we have, they call this now the Ethiopian Sea. All right, so we have the Southern Ocean. All right, we have the eastern, something called the Eastern Ocean. Then over here, as we come more and more west, it says the Atlantic. All right, but we always hear about the transatlantic slave trade, but notice this connection with the Ethiopian Sea. All right, so just looking at the water now, with the change of the names, you know, of these bodies of water, no doubt had a lot to do with the rise of maritime law. Maritime law. Remember, the scriptures, properly and rightly divided, address the 9 areas of Jah people's activity. All right, so I'm speaking about the law, maritime law. Now remember what time we're speaking, because we're seeing signs here, but we also have to put it in context with the time. All right, so now let's zoom out right here, and let's first of all go to the central part of the map. All right, we had come across this before, and this is Very wonderful to see this here again. Here we have Ethiopia. It says this country is wholly unknown to the Europeans, Isn't that interesting? This country, which country? Ethiopia. Now, let's note where we are, or where this territory is located on this 1710 map. As we zoom out, once again, going more to the east, we have a country that is called right here Abyssinia. Interesting. Now, we have to also note this, that this is a European. Most of these maps are either redos of other maps they came across, because many times they found and searched out information, but they also did it in their own hand. This is why I tell all the Habarim to take your notes, have your composition, your composition notebook, and take good notes. Put it in your hand. Put that knowledge in your hand. Write it down. You'll be surprised the synaptic connections between the hand, right, and the brain, but also the mind and mindfulness and recall of vital information, and also putting it together, because we're zooming in right here on Abyssinia. Now, this is how the Europeans in 1710, right, were dividing or sectioning the continent, right? And note how we can find maps years after years after years, and we can see these changes, changing laws and times. That's Daniel's prophecy, changing laws and times. So when we talk about the end of the world, we're talking about the Seclorum, a particular world system, or the end of the so-called New World. The New World Order, the 1776. So this is 1710. Now, as we zoom in over here and we go to the west, we find Negroland. I just want to note that right there. Here we have Negroland. Now, note over here they say Ethiopia. This country is wholly unknown to the Europeans. Remember, this is 1710, right, on a 1710 map. All right, so we're going to backtrack for a moment. Let's backtrack right here for a moment. Go back here for a moment. Now, when was this map? This map was at, which year was this map? 1747. Now, note over here on this particular map right here, Ethiopia seems to have a smaller location, but still is in the same relative location in the Ethiopic Ocean. Here it's called ocean. There's a difference between a sea and an ocean. So let's just note that as well for the record. But let's backtrack right here again. Let's backtrack right over here. Now we looked at this particular map. That's a later map. And let's see if we can bring it to the map that it's this map. Look at this, 1774. Now, remember, the 1710 map said this country was wholly unknown to the what? Europeans. Now, it didn't say a particular European, the British or the French, Frankish, to be frank with you, the French, the Franks, or the Spanish, Portuguese. It didn't say any of these nations. It basically says to the Europeans. Remember, we are in the times of the Gentiles looking at these particular maps. These particular maps now kind of help us keep track of how we got to this particular point, and also to find the way home as well, right? Now, so we have 1700. Look at the 1700 map for a moment. Remember, they said the country was what? Notice, the continent is referred to as Ethiopia. Here on this 1700 map, let's make sure that we also save this particular map as well. This 1700 map by Andrew Fear. Now let's zoom in. All right, simple, to the point. Note how the continent is called Ethiopia. In the center of the map, Ethiopia. From east to west, Ethiopia. Right? And to even prove it even more so, right, we have the Oceanus Aethiopicus. Right? And note that the Oceanus Aethiopicus, right, is both in the west and also going to the south. Right? The south. So the continent here is Ethiopia. No doubt the Europeans, at that time being very professedly Christian and doing a lot of Bible translations, was looking at the Bible and certain things that they saw in the Bible, are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel, since many of them were posing as Israel and Israelites themselves in their own speculations and calling America Canaan land, the pilgrims, in order to conquer it under the veil, of, you could say Christianity, so to speak. That's like Esau reversing, wearing kind of Jacob's garments, so to speak. But because they found these things, no doubt, how could they treat the children of Israel overtly that way? So they had to change laws and times and also play the name game. So here we see that the country is not totally unknown. I mean, I think Andrew Fear, no doubt, was a European, or was he an American? Right here, this map is written primarily in Latin. This is like a Latin map. It's an old map. It's a European map, right? So therefore, when they say that the country was totally unknown, look at the game they're playing. A country and a continent is two different things. So they had already downsized Ethiopia on that particular map. See, the maps tell their own stories. Like we talk about learning to read the sign language linguistically with the Hebrew and the Afro-Shemitic, but also learning to read these maps, right? So this particular map right here, note the ocean, right, covering not just West Africa, or what's called today West Africa, but also the South Ethiopia, we can say, right? So note this right here. Now they have this Libyan interior, the desert up there. Now we point to this right here, right? This is 1700, right? 1700. We have, I think that's the same map over there. There's a particular map. Okay, here it goes over here. You see the 1774? Let's click on the 1774. They say this is an accurate map of Africa. But as we look at the map, we're going to see that the name is not Africa. See, Africa at one time only referred to the area of Libya, Tunisia, that particular region from Roman times was referred to as Africa, right? So that just so that there's no confusion about that, but they play the name games, right? The laws, the times, we're living in the time of the nations, the European nations, the Anglo-American nations. Ones may also refer to as white supremacy. White supremacy is another way of referring to the Gentiles, or the times of the Gentiles, the nations and nation states. And we see how they divided Africa and also other parts of the world by creating nation states and even destroying ancient landmarks and boundaries and even treaties and covenants that were established among many of these peoples who lived in the land, because this was their time, right? This was their hour, you could say, right? But let's zoom into this map here. Now, this is a very, very important map. Remember, it's 1774, right? It's dated as being 1774. Now, let's just look at how this map is divided, because each map tells of the particular intel or intelligence, what sort of information do they have and what sort of intel they were making out of that information that they had. Each of these maps tell that particular story. So what we've established already by even this map right here, let's put this on the screen for a moment. Let's keep this on the screen for a moment right here, because this is where either some of the ain't right Israelites, right, who basically slander, and also I think it borders on, because it's insulting what the Almighty has said in His Word concerning the children of Ethiopians based on one particular bad concordance, the Zondervan Concordance, which is basically explaining to you the table of Gentiles or the table of nations, where it is in their power to change laws and times, right? But there's a record. See, that these are receipts, All right, these are receipts and points of reference where we can see, well, how did they get to this particular point, right? And what was true? What was true? We're seeing what is true. So we're seeing the connection right here on this map, once again pointing to the continent that's now called Africa and divided here into what is called Ethiopia Inferior and Ethiopia Superior. Now, on other maps, they say Lower Ethiopia for Ethiopia Inferior, which is West Africa. Note that right there, that West Africa is referred to on this 1774 map as Ethiopia Inferior and also referred to as Lower Ethiopia. Then, as we go to the east and coming to the east of the river now, we have Ethiopia Superior, or on other maps, Upper Ethiopia. But note that Ethiopia Inferior or Lower Ethiopia is also referred to as NEGROLAND. Referred to as what? As NEGROLAND. Now, if the scripture says, right, this might be also a reason why it no longer is on the map, because those people, our people, the once lost now found black and brown sheep of the Beit Israel, those who have fled into Africa from Babylon to Timbuktu, other documents such as that, get into more of the details, were already brought to this spiritual Sodom and Egypt, brought across the trans-Ethiopic ocean slave trade. You see the Ethiopic Ocean right there. All right, that's West Africa, the so-called slave coast, the Gold Coast. All right, as we get to zoom in even a little bit more, note how they say over right here, Upper Guinea, right? And then when we have Benin, some say Benin, Benjamin, right? Then we have Upper Guinea, right? Upper Guinea right here. So now just to note that the ocean right there, that they transported the Israelites, the Hebrews, the lost sheeples, the tribes, right, was called the Ethiopic Ocean. Are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel? Amos 9 and 7. All right, Ethiopia, this man was born there. All right, speaking of the second advent. All right, so we have Ethiopia Superior over here. We also have Abyssinia. Just note that right there. Now, this is based on the Europeans' intel at that time, saying that, well, in these large areas, this is what these large areas were called and referred to. Now, note that Ethiopia and Guinea, both on this map, seem to have an upper and a lower. Right? Upper, lower, inferior, superior. But note the connection with Ethiopia Inferior, NEGROLAND. Right? Just to put that on the screen for a moment right there. Right? This will make a good meme, along with the other NEGROLAND, because some of the Israelites have been showing you West Africa, where it was called on the older maps NEGROLAND. If you recall back in the early, I think back in the other 2012, because 2012 is actually coming forward. That's a whole other video, a whole other reason there, but it's related to the signs of the time. This is a very important sign of the time. That at the time that West Africa was referred to as NEGROLAND, it was also referred to as Ethiopia Inferior. And this is roughly circa what? 1774. Was the enslavement trade still going on then? Was the enslavement trade still going on at that time? We know the whole connection with this 2019 to 1619. But during this period, much uckery, much, enough things were going on, all right? Enough are going. All right, so we point to this right here, and not to be too long on this, but just pointing out some of those basic things right here, because I think on this map right here, they call it Negrite. Well, this is a French map. I think I pointed this out before. This map right here is a French map. French map of West Africa. All right, we have a French map of West Africa right there. Let's see if we can take it back to the upper, lower Ethiopia. Would like you to get to see that one more time in this video, the upper, lower Ethiopia for yourself. Is it this map right here? This is the 1747 map. I think this is the one right here. As you can see, it needs to get a clearer one of this, but it also still has NEGROLAND. If you can see that right there, it still has NEGROLAND. Need to get a much clearer map of this one right here. Let's see if we can do this while we are still on this particular video. Let Google search, and Google's nosy, they got the algorithms and all that. Let them search for more sizes of this map to see how clear we can get this map. Let's see how clear this is. This one, this is a little bit clearer, but you can see the NEGROLAND, lower Ethiopia, just to prove that point right there. Lower Ethiopia, so Ethiopia and Negro, Israel, right? The Israelite, lower Ethiopia, upper Ethiopia, right? So are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me? I think the answer right there should be abundantly clear. All these are Amazon. All these are Amazon products. I'm noticing that. All right, we're gonna have to seek to find a better map of this, but this is the 1747. 1747. Now this is the map that often is used a lot. Right, the NEGROLAND in Guinea and Guinea, right, map. Let's save this one for the record right here. Let's do this here. Here we go. All right, now this map is dated. When is this map dated? Got to figure out when this map is dated. But notice it's the NEGROLAND and Guinea. Right, we can see Atlantic Ocean. Whenever we can see Atlantic Ocean, we know that most likely it's a later. It's a later map, right? It's a later map. Now this gives a good kind of an overview as well. So the NEGROLAND and the Ethiopian and Israelite migrations. So see what we got right here, the Gold Coast, and also more inland. They're not pointing to all the directions, but they're even showing that there was that coming out of Ethiopia of the east, and the South Africa link right there from Israel up here, right? Or from the land grant, the first land grant given to the Israelites after the Exodus, right? Going into Yemen connection, Binyamin, right? We have Benin also in the west. So when we went to places, of course, while having a knowledge of our identity, who we be, we name places. We'll find Judah, you know, king of Judah kingdom on certain areas of certain maps because of that connection right there. So this is also a very important tool right there as well. So let's backtrack this. That connects with, okay, wow, somebody did this one right here. Atlantic slave trade. We need to update this to the trans-Ethiopic ocean slave trade. All right, so we can see this connection right there as well, 70 AD. This is what the end of the world order, the Seclorum, the times of the Gentiles, all right, these artificial nations, you know, these artificial nation states. That's what's going on, these artificial nation states and the times of the nation states. Because you remember when looking at some of these older maps, it's a wider, you know, we have a wider area, you know, a very wide area. Oh, this is very beautiful that this comes up right here. Let's save this one as well. Again, right? This map right here, this is also that connection with Israel, right? Old Israel, or we can say with the first land grant, right? And that remnant coming out and bearing fruit upward, as prophecy in the scripture also shows us. So the Ethiopian connection, ones that are not finding it, they haven't done due diligence, you know, or if they know it and they're not sharing with you, well, they're suppressing the truth. Either way, it's not good. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, right? And over here, this is also another map as well, right? though not pointing out, let's see, this is Christian Ethiopia, but there's also the Judaic, you know, yes, that kingdom, right? So there's a few of these. I'm seeing some familiar things right here, just pointing to some of this since we're touching on some maps right here. The Abyssinian hypothesis on Israelite, Hebrew, Jewish history, new interpretation of the Bible. Interesting right there. I did come across this previously. Haven't gotten into all the research, but some of these maps and word pics are quite interesting right here. Who are the Israelite, Hebrew, Palestinian, Israelite turned Hebrew, the connection with Ethiopia, ancient, to say ancient is like say black Arabia, the ancient Arabia, black Arabia, and Yemen. So we can see, you know, this going to and fro, these kingdoms, though there was the Red Sea, right, that was no impassable barrier. You know, it's like going from, you know, Brooklyn to Manhattan, so to speak. You know, so this is also another very interesting and important study search. Not to go too deep into this right here, but this is important parts of our story, of our history, that we need to know. All right, so anyway, just to back this up right here, This is the Bantu, the link with the Bantu and Biafra as well in West Africa. All right, so you have this here. Okay, brothers and sisters, I'm a little bit outside the main area of my original thought to present to you, but seeing some of these other, you know, word pics also helps to bring it out, like this one here. I think this one here, enough said. It's time to know the truth and to act accordingly.